that average tenure at a company is between 2 to 3 years anyways right now. Job hoppers, it's very easy to see. They have very short stints and their responsibilities and job titles, they really don't change. You see that at a glance that it's same position, maybe slight change, but when you're really looking into it, there is no growth. With high growth people specifically, you will see that there's a progression. You will see that they're challenging themselves. And a lot of times when you're talking to them, the way that they talk about it is different. A job hopper will say, how much are you offering? That's all I care about. That's how you can recognize a job hopper.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great Tactical Tuesday episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days we cover things like trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Some days we open it up for Q&A, and other days Matt drops by to share a mic drop episode where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. All right, today's Tactical Tuesday scenario. You come across a resume or a profile and you see that the person has had a pretty short tenure, less than 2 years in the last 2 to 3 roles that they've held. Your warning bells are starting to go off and you're about to pass on this candidate. But our question is, should you? What if they aren't that job hopper like your warning bells are starting to tell you, but what if they're a high growth individual that would actually help take that hiring organization to the next level? It's a very different conversation now. So this scenario is a lot more common than many recruiters think. And today we have Vivien joining us as we're going to unpack how do you identify the differences between a job hopper and a high growth individual. So with that, let's get back into it. Vivien, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Long time no see.
Right? Yeah, it's almost been a couple of weeks. Dun, dun, dun. So, yeah, this concept of job hoppers versus high growth individuals. I know you and I had been talking about it a little bit before, and we were just like, we should do an episode on this. This would be pretty fun to get into. So, I guess how do you want to start this one off? Should we like define similarities and then get into differences, or do you want to go through a story? How do you want to kick this off first?
I think it makes sense to start with the job market has changed so much that average tenure at a company is between 2 to 3 years anyways right now. And so, granted, it depends on the generation. So, older generations, they have a tendency to stick around a little bit longer, whereas younger generations, especially recent college graduates, they don't really have that attachment to companies. So, they're more open to switching jobs more frequently if that's what works best for them. So, that like old school type loyalty isn't quite there anymore. And there's a variety of reasons that kind of come into play with that. But the main thing really is that this has changed. So we have to rethink how we even look at tenure, what we consider about the specific tenure, and what else to look out for. Because nowadays, a big thing is also mental health, and not everybody is a good manager. A majority of people leave a position because of who they directly report to and how that working relationship is. And so this is where you have to consider what else might be going on that is prompting this person to make all of these changes. Then you take into account the last couple of years with COVID and the lockdowns and working in the office, going fully remote, then return to office and all that kind of stuff. This has impacted everybody's resumes as well and work experiences. And so you have to keep this in mind. But there are some ways where you can see this is a job hopper that will leave the first chance that they get because somebody else is offering them a higher salary versus somebody who has maybe just had bad luck with jobs for one reason or another. And then there's a third category of someone who actually has been changing jobs because they hit a ceiling. They're very quick to grow. They make huge changes. And I guess we can dive into what's the differences between those.
Yeah. So that's really, I think it's interesting, one, that you pulled out the average tenure right now is 2 to 3 years. So that's going to reset your range and your mental model, so to speak, of like normalized used to be what, I don't even know what it was, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years or something at a company. So one, you have to put that back into perspective of like, that's the old days, times have changed. So rethink that as part of this. So, okay, that's really interesting. All right. Yeah, let's get into some of the differences now between the two groups.
Let's do it. Main thing I would say, job hoppers, it's very easy to see they have very short stints and their responsibilities and job titles, they really don't change. So you see that at a glance that it's same position, maybe slight change, but when you're really looking into it, there is no growth. It's more, they're really just hopping, like they're making vertical changes. Like it's not really like
Hmm.
horizontal ones. Like it's, they're not really, there's no upwards movement. There's no, I want a new challenge. They're not trying something completely new. They didn't make a huge career pivot or something like that. It's fairly consistent. With that, you have to keep in mind, like, talk to them. That's going to be the main lesson of today's episode is just go ahead and talk to them, because I had a couple of people that I came across, like especially early career people, where they graduated. One person in particular really stands out. This guy, he graduated December 2019. Bad time to graduate college and try to get a job, because he got a job early 2020, and then after about 6 months, and because he was an engineer, so he had to be on site, it was a manufacturing company, he got laid off because he was very junior, not really all that experienced, so he didn't have a whole lot of value to bring into the company, and they had to strip it down. And so he had to switch jobs very often, because there are some companies that did the layoffs very early on and others ended up actually experiencing growth, so they needed people and they ended up hiring. And so within 2 years, he had 4 different jobs. And so when you're looking at the resume, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a job hopper. The responsibilities are the same, job titles are the same. He's just hopping from one place to another. But then when you actually talk to him, he then explained, well, this happened with this company, then this happened, and then that happened. So you really want to have a conversation with that person to see, are they genuinely got like job hoppers, or did life just keep on throwing curveballs at them and they actually just bootstrap themselves, and in a very difficult kind of market, especially when you have to have like a hands-on type job as like some kind of engineer and you have to be on site on the manufacturing plant. Like the fact that he kept on getting back on his feet, not losing hope, and finding more jobs fairly quickly too, which is why he had so many in a short amount of time. That's actually a really good quality to have. And so that's someone that you would want to consider. But when you're just looking at the resume or profile, you would say, absolutely not. He's never going to stay with us.
That's interesting. I like that you point that out because, yeah, it's like, as you said, talk versus assume every time, especially if it on paper they look like they'd be a really good candidate. They have the skills, some of the experience, or something else where you do have that little inside voice of yours saying, like, I think there's something to it. Although the bells are going off, talk to them, figure it out. Because as you said there, like that perseverance and that person, 4 roles in 2 years, once you know that background to it, that's really impressive because there's a lot of people that just throw in the towel after one, let alone two. I mean, four. I can't imagine that. So I really like that story because it helps illustrate what happens when you do go a layer deeper into like, let's talk, let's have the conversation and get the full story here instead of assuming what's going on or with them.
Yeah. And it's, you really just want to talk, because the thing is, a recruiter doesn't lose anything by reaching out. When somebody responds back to you, have that conversation with them, because you went through the effort of finding them and reaching out to them. They have responded to you. That means something is going on where they're open to something, or maybe they're not open to it, but they know someone who is actually looking or is interested and they can give you a referral. Worst case scenario, you have a conversation with them and you find out what is actually going on in that particular space, in that industry, at that company. Why is this person open to talking to me? What is going on? Are there some life changes? Is something going on in the industry as a whole that I can maybe get a little bit of insight on? Because I had someone that was a very high growth individual. So I guess we can pivot into high growth now. And amazing candidate. So very technical. It was a chemist, and she ended up actually changing companies every about like 2 to 3 years. So her tenure was actually normal, but she kept on changing. Her responsibilities kept on changing. But the reason why she actually ended up changing is because every single company, something happened and she had to leave and go somewhere else. So once there was a family emergency, she had to move back closer to family, so she had to switch jobs. Another time the company got sued, so they had to shut down that particular location. Another time they ended up doing a restructuring, so that completely changed her role. The fourth time that she lost her job, it was because the company was acquired. So they moved operations and she wasn't in a position to relocate. And the one thing she kept on saying is, I just want to find that one place where I can make a difference and I can grow. But anywhere that I go, something happens after a couple of years where my job is at risk and I have to start looking again. And she was tired of it. And this was someone who already had over 10 years of experience. But looking at her resume, even the hiring managers, when I sent her over, said, we're concerned about how jumpy this person is. And I said, well, I broke it down to you, but let's revisit this again. This is what happened at this company. This is what happened at this company. And they went as far as even looking up news articles to confirm that she wasn't lying. And then they actually ended up passing on her. Then they came back and they ended up interviewing her. They really liked her. But it's sometimes you just really have to have that conversation to figure out what is going on. And with high growth people specifically, you will see that there's a progression. You will see that they're challenging themselves. And a lot of times when you're talking to them, the way that they talk about it is different. A job hopper will say, how much are you offering? That's all I care about. That's the only thing that they want to know. They want to know, how much money am I getting by making this switch? That's how you can recognize a job hopper. Somebody who is high growth, or maybe something else happened where they just had a lot of kind of like switches that were kind of like a little bit more lateral, you will see, okay, something personal happened, life just happened. With high growth people, you will see that they are hungry for a new challenge. They want something new. They've gotten bored. They hit a ceiling. They were promised something that wasn't delivered on. And so this is where they're starting to be open to something new, and they will then switch around quite a bit. But you will see that each role was something completely different. It's almost like they're a little like chameleon.
Hmm. That's interesting when you break it out in those two different ways. So, yeah, the high growth one, especially because I've worked with a number of different people like that, where, and you hear it in conversations even before recruiting or hiring, but you can usually tell when you talk to them like about previous roles or what they currently do. They'll be quick to say, I like to learn. I like to do something different, or I get bored every 6 months if I do the same thing over and over. So you can usually spot these well ahead of time, especially if you're a recruiter and you're working off your CRM, you can note this type of thing. So you can know when you pitch them later on, it's not a job hopper. And this is also part of like when you pitch them to especially a startup or a growth organization, be like, this is going to be someone perfect for you to grow with the company, because they're going to get bored after a couple of years. So they'll want to increase their responsibilities. They'll want to take more. So if you all are growing on the trajectory that you think you will, this is a perfect person for you. So yeah, I think I like how you easily could tell a difference of, are they in it for the money, or are they in it because they want to do more, to learn more, to help accomplish more?
Yeah. And those people are really perfect for companies that are about to go through a growth spurt, or even a startup, like you said, because they take initiative. They're looking for a challenge. They're not just looking at, this is my job description, these are the only things that I am doing. They're actually looking to go beyond the scope to really make everything that they touch and see better, whether it's directly within their field of control or whether they can actually help someone else out and collaborate somewhere else. And in the startup space specifically, or in a high growth type situation, as you're growing, there's going to be new roles that can be created. There's going to be a need for somebody to step into a role that is technically outside of their scope. A high growth individual is going to see that and immediately start pivoting. Even if it's only a temporary pivot, they're going to kind of like adopt that area that needs a little bit of assistance, and they're going to start working on that. And that's when you're going through like a huge growth, that's somebody that you really, really want, because as you're growing, you're kind of bursting at the seams. There's going to be gap that somebody needs to fill. And this is where you want people that take initiative to fill those gaps, as opposed to trying to identify and constantly see, oh, I'm noticing a gap because all of these things have gone wrong. You want somebody who starts seeing the warning signs and then tries to do something about it, raise it up to the level that it needs to go, but also try to find solutions in the meantime, and some like patch it a little bit until a more permanent solution can be found. Because that's always going to happen with any kind of like high growth. And so you want someone that wants to grow really fast, because those environments are exactly what they're looking for.
And so once you, as a recruiter, you're about to place this person, or your hiring manager looking to bring them on, anything that you need to know about these types of individuals?
This is where I would probably have a conversation, like a true heart to heart with a hiring manager, and say, listen, this is a high growth individual. You can lose them very easily. And they have great opportunities. They can go anywhere that they want to. What are you going to do to retain them? How are you going to actually help them grow? Will you give them the opportunity to step into various roles, or are you going to say, no, that's outside of your scope, stay in your lane? So this is where you have to know, what kind of hiring manager are you working with? Who are they as a person? What are they doing? Are they a kind of person that can manage somebody like that really well? Because high growth people, they need wiggle room to be creative and do things their own way and just be trusted that they will do the right things, that they have integrity. You cannot micromanage them. That will drive them out within a month, and they're not afraid to leave within a month either. And so you really want to make sure that you trust them, that you have a solid way of onboarding them so that once they're fully onboarded and you kind of like unleash them, that they know exactly what to do, and you could just let them be and trust them and check in and say, hey, what do you need from me? What are you kind of dealing with? What are you seeing? How can I help you? So it takes a specific kind of manager to deal with this as well. And you as a recruiter need to know, is this that kind of manager? Because you're working with them a lot more. But then also, if you do have that kind of manager, have that conversation with them, because managers don't always work with high growth people. So if this is the first time that they're encountering this, have that conversation with them to really kind of give them a heads up. This is not somebody that you manage how you manage everybody else. You have to be different with this particular person. And depending on the internal kind of dynamics and politics of the company, that might work or that might not go over well either.
Yeah. So you share that with the hiring manager. Let's say you've got this high growth individual, they're perfect for a role. Hiring manager really likes them, but this hiring manager is a bit of a, they like to watch over everyone on their team, so to speak. They're watching their move and everything. And your organization is very bureaucratic, a lot of red tape, a lot of lines. Do you as a recruiter, do you still pass that candidate on to them knowing this, or do you, I guess, whose interest do you put first there, the hiring organization or the candidate, when you know how this is going to play out?
I mean, if I know that I'm talking to a high growth individual and the opportunity that I reached out to them about would not fit what they're looking for, I would honestly say that, and then let the candidate decide if they want to be submitted for consideration. If they want to be submitted for consideration, then hiring managers that are very micromanaging don't really want to deal with people that seem jumpy to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say a miracle happens, they do want to talk to this person. During the interview, most likely they will not get along, because you
Yeah.
have someone that really wants to micromanage. And so they're going to interview to see, can I micromanage them? Can I be this micromanager with this person, or are they going to make my life really annoying as a micromanager? Even if they're not consciously aware of it, it's going to come out. They're not going to get along. They're both going to part ways, and they're going to say, I don't think this is the right opportunity for me. And so it kind of naturally already happens, because there is some truth to like attracts like, and those two
Mm-hmm.
would repel each other.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, so we've gone through all the differences. What are some final takeaways knowing all of this? Like, what do recruiters need to keep in mind as they come across this?
Just have a conversation with them. That's number one. Number two, if you know that an organization would thrive with a high growth person, you can actually specifically source for them. There is average tenure filters at this point, and you can leverage those to see who's jumpy, and then based on who's jumpy, who has very short tenures, you can then have a conversation with them to see, are they just job hopping for a better salary, or are those genuine people, like they're very growth oriented, that are just looking for a challenge where they can stick around for a little bit longer and make a difference long term. And you can filter for that. If you are someone who is not really looking for someone who's a job hopper, I wouldn't recommend using the average tenure filter, because that would rule out people that have been affected by life. And life and working has been really weird since 2020. So I think average tenure for now needs to be put very much on the back burner. If somebody is
Mm-hmm.
responding to you and is interested and is qualified, regardless of how long they've been with a company, have a chat with them. I mean, there's even some cases where I actually had a friend of mine, he just accepted a position, was there for 2 weeks, and then his dream job actually came back to make him an offer. And he ended up putting in his notice. It was obviously less than ideal, But sometimes when you arrive at a company, the way that they sold themselves during the interview process versus what they're actually like in person is very different. What is the point of hanging out there just to fulfill the tenure requirement to be considered a good, reliable candidate? That
Mm-hmm.
makes no sense. If it's not the right fit, make a change. And I think we need to start looking past this. There's so many better ways to source and figure out, is this the right fit? And it's time to start calling people again.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots to think about there. That's
Mhm.
this is a deep one, but I think in a good way. There's going to be a lot of discussion around this, and I think some people are starting to notice it, especially since 2020, like you mentioned. But I'm glad that the conversation's starting back up a little bit more, especially on behalf of the high growth individuals who unfortunately sometimes are locked in as job hoppers when it's like, no, I just get bored. I want to do something bigger, better. Like, right organization, find me, apply me, and I'm gonna kill it. So yeah, those are the best ones. All right. Well, this was a fun one. So hopefully people got a good bit from this conversation. Hopefully it starts to help them think about how they are going about when they do source candidates, come across candidates who seem to have that short tenure. Well, 1, 2 to 3 years, that's average now, just FYI. 2, really think about that in perspective of before you classify them as the only bucket in your head being job hopper. They could be, life happens group, or they could be the high growth. So Vivien, as always, truly appreciate you coming to join us for the show. This was a good and insightful one for us. All right. Well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you really like this episode, which I know you did, we've got a link to a similar one in the show notes, and you can find those in your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website, loxo.co/podcast. Almost called it Loxcasts there. Something to it. Full video episodes are available on YouTube as well as on our website. And if you have questions, you're looking for advice, want to hear us take something on, send those to us, podcast@loxo.co. All right, everyone. That's the show. That was a great Tactical Tuesday with Vivien. Until next time. Bye, y'all.